So that was how you do the whole reluctant hero storyline. It's a wonderfully effective way to market, and it's really, really good if you're not really comfortable with saying, listen to me, I'm the greatest person in the world and do what I say. It's a great way to say that without really saying it, which is nice. Now, in this next video, what I'd like to share with you is the classic us versus them storyline, one of the most executed storylines in the history of persuasion, really. I mean, literally in the history of persuasion, all throughout our history as a culture of humans. You've seen the old us versus them storyline used to incite warfare, riots, and all kinds of other crazy activity, right? So the good news is you can also use the same storyline to have a more positive outcome, namely selling your stuff, right? So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to give you some specific examples from my own businesses as well. This is very, very easy to implement what I'm about to show you. It's literally, you can just pretty much cookie cutter it right into your own marketing if you deem it appropriate. One word of warning about the old us versus them. The outcome that I have for giving you this course is to help you make as much money as humanly possible, as quickly as possible, and naturally, ethically. When I'm teaching you this us versus them stuff, it's very important that you understand that you never alienate another person, individual, or organization specifically. I'm not out there to help you propagate any sort of hate or ill will or bad feelings towards any particular group of people at all. And you'll see how to do that in this next video. You'll see how to use us versus them without doing any of that hinky stuff. But I just really wanted to get that out there. That's not what this is about, okay? So when I say us versus them, it's really done a little bit more in fun and ethically and without all the dark connotations. So don't let the title of it freak you out. And when you're implementing this stuff, just heed my warning. Use your new powers for good, okay? Let's get started.
So now let's explore another one of the mass control storylines, which is the famous us versus them storyline. Here's why this whole thing works so well. It's based entirely on the fact that we as human beings create our belief systems often on completely irrational things. First of all, we as people like to blame our problems on outside factors. It's human nature. Okay, so it's not my fault that I get out of breath all the time when I'm trying to jog. It's the cigarette manufacturer's fault for making cigarettes unhealthy, right? So it's their fault. It's certainly not my fault. It's not my fault that I'm not making money on the internet. It's this guru's fault for not telling us all the secrets that they know, right? Furthermore, people like to be included in an us. Everybody wants to be a part of something, and this is really illustrated with traditional religion, and it's really illustrated with politics, and is illustrated in military movements and government activity. And highlighting the them, the enemy, causes a bond with us to be created. So if you look at World War II, for example, and the horrible activities that occurred in the Holocaust, Nazi Germany focused so much on those pesky Jews, in their opinion. You know, obviously I don't share those beliefs at all, but they focused so much energy on this common perceived enemy that the bond with the Nazi Party was created between all those people who were not a member of them. In this case, it was the Jews. Now, I'm certainly in no way at all advocating that belief. I'm just explaining to you that that's the way the human mind works, and I'm using that example to give you an exaggerated case of where that sort of reasoning occurred. And of course, by simply not being them, we become credible. And I'm really going to illustrate this in a minute when I show you some of my own works using us versus them implied statements. So us versus them appeals to the way that our minds create stereotypes. Whenever we have a them, we always have a stereotypical image of them. And it's usually based on an A plus B equals C type of blueprint. And it's also based on some other ones, but I'll illustrate this one for you. And this is a silly one, but it is the way that these stereotypes are often constructed in our minds. So we'll have A, Alice listens to rap music, okay? Plus B is marijuana smoking. So Alice smokes pot, which is B. So A plus B equals C. All people who listen to rap music smoke pot. Now that's idiotic, okay, but that's the way it is. That's the way that our minds often construct belief systems based on stereotypes specifically. So let's have a look at totally irrational beliefs, and we'll also use now the A minus B equals C formula. All right. A, in this case, the terrorists were Muslim. Minus B now, Muslims are not Christian. Therefore, C, non-Christians are terrorists. Okay, again, this is an over-exaggerated example of this, but it's also somewhat a real example. There are people who actually hold these beliefs. Well, if you're not Christian, you must be bad. And I'm not casting judgment on anybody's beliefs by stating this. I'm just saying this is how we construct these type of things. So let me give you an example from the internet marketing world. Okay. A, gurus are hypey. I don't think hypey is really a word, but it is now, all right? It's part of our secret language. Okay, so gurus are hypey. Frank is not hypey. So A minus B here equals C. Frank is not a guru. And now here's how we can use that to further construct another belief. A, gurus are bad. Minus B, Frank is not a guru. Therefore, Frank is good. Okay, so that's how we string along an entire belief system, really, based on that A minus B equals C kind of thing. So when you're using us versus them, there are some key factors that I want you to keep in mind. First of all, is this blaming things on them gives your prospect absolution. It's not their fault, or it is their fault. It's not your fault, ever. Whenever you absolve somebody from guilt, you gain their trust in you and you gain their desire to follow you and listen to you, because who doesn't want to be absolved from any type of guilt, right? If you can point out that it's not their fault and then show them whose fault it really is, and further that belief and absolve them from any sort of pain like that, then they're going to want to listen to you, of course. Another key factor here is the implied statement that if you're not with us, you're against us. Okay, and that's almost part of that A minus B equals C type of thinking, but it's extremely powerful. It's present in all of our minds to some degree, and what we want to do is we want to play on that when we're doing us versus them as much as we can. Another belief is they benefit from our suffering. An example of that would be, those pesky gurus are making so much money because they're not telling us all the secrets we really need to know to make money. And the longer we don't make money, the more we'll keep buying their stuff. Therefore, they benefit. Another one could be the pharmaceutical companies are keeping us sick by treating the symptoms and never treating the actual cause of the disease. And the reason they do this is because they want us to be sick, because they want us to continue to buy the medications. Therefore, they benefit from our suffering. Another key factor here is the belief that we're all in this together. All right, so when you have this us versus them and you create an us and you bring people into the us, therefore, hey, you and I are part of this big thing, and by joining us, you're part of something greater than yourself. All right, and let me illustrate that if you're not with us, you're against us thing a little better here, with this somewhat silly yet realistic example. All right, so let's say I go to a Marine Corps recruiter's office, quite by accident, of course, in reality, right? And the Marine recruiter says to me, "Son, we need you to get over there and kill some of them terrorists." Okay, and to which I would respond, dude, I don't really want to do that. And of course he would say, "Well, then you must be a terrorist." What do you mean? You don't want to fight for America? You don't want to go over there and remove this threat to America? Well, then you must hate America, right? A minus B equals C. To which I would reply, well, actually, I just don't want to kill any. And then he would, somebody get this terrorist away from me before I shoot him. Okay, that is an exaggerated example of that. If you're not with us, then you must be against us kind of thing. And it's an exaggerated example of the fact that people want to be part of something greater than themselves. So people often join military organizations because of the A minus B equals C thing, and they join military organizations because they want to be part of something. And that's in no way implying that there's anything wrong with joining the military. You know, thank God we have the military, really. I certainly don't want to join it, but I'm not in any way knocking the military, and most certainly I'm not knocking the Marine Corps. You know, my father and grandfather on both sides of my family were Marines, so go Big Green. Anyway, here's the engine that drives us in our plight against them, and that is secrets. The us versus them approach relies heavily on telling secrets, and these are always secrets that they don't want us to know, right? And therefore, when you let someone in on the big secret, you become one of us, or they become one of us. So if I let you in on the secret, then you become one of us. In fact, just the phrase let in actually implies that you're being taken into the fold, right? Language is very, very powerful. So lots of secrets that we can use here. There are, of course, the long-lost secrets, such as the long-lost fighting secrets of the Shaolin monks. Of course, these are the secrets that the professional martial arts trainers of today hope you never discover, right? There are the insider secrets, such as the insider secrets of the world's greatest seduction artists. Of course, these being the insider secrets that those lesser seduction artists pray that you never discover, otherwise you wouldn't need to be buying their stuff, which is of course incomplete. And of course you have the classic shocking secrets, such as like a Kevin Trudeau type of a thing where he has that natural health cures they don't want you to know. And of course they're, you know, secrets they don't want you to know. All of these secrets are the ones they don't want you to know. So there's a formula when you take an us versus them storyline approach, and it goes a little something like this. You discover a secret, okay? Naturally, it's a secret they don't want us to know. This secret proves that whatever the market's problem is their fault, and their being the they, not the market, not ours, not you and me, not us as we are here united in our fight against them, right, and united on our mission to solve this big problem. And furthermore, you're only revealing this secret to help further our goals. You're not revealing this for the money. No, you're just on a crusade against them, really, and to help us, right? And finally, by buying, you're going to become one of us. And if you don't buy, you're going to be playing into their hands. And furthermore, if you don't buy, you're a bad person. And you do this with implied statements, which I'll show you in a minute. But I'll give you kind of a silly example. Your product isn't for everybody. It's not for total losers who hate freedom, love Satan, and kill kittens in their spare time. But if you do love freedom and you don't murder kittens, then this product is probably for you. Of course, the implication there is that if you don't buy this stuff, then you hate freedom, you love Satan, and you kill kittens. All right, and I know that's silly, but it's extremely powerful. So I'd like to show you now some examples of some of my work from various campaigns where I'm using us versus them in a little bit more of a subtle and implied way. So let's go to that right now. So let's get into some examples of us versus them and my own personal copy for material that I've done not only for my own business but for other people's businesses. So what you see here is some of your printed material. It's the us versus them example section. This is, of course, the section that they don't want you to see. It's only for us. All right, and this is an example from my Dean Rankin dog training business. So this is the first email in the series, and the us versus them part of this is more implied right here. I never come right out and say there's a them yet. I'll show you an example where I do, but this is a little bit of an implicit us versus them type of communication, and it's right here. When I say here's what it's not about: scolding your dog, hitting your dog, or punishing your dog in any way. What I'm doing right here by focusing what it's not is implying that anyone else who teaches traditional dog training stuff, which usually involves negative behavior, is wrong. But I'm not coming right out and saying it yet. I'm simply implying that. And if you remember, I said several times that I think implicit decisions are much more powerful than something that someone concludes as a result of explicit communication. So when someone draws a conclusion on their own, they're much more likely to defend it and stick by it and really bring it into their own core belief systems, more so than they would be if someone just simply told them something and said, okay, here, you need to believe this. So that's why I like this implicit kind of stuff. So now let's move on to another one. Here we go. And this one is, again, from my autoresponder sequence. I think this might be message number 3 or something. And I begin with never do this to your dog. This is a very openable subject line because, the reader is going to say, well, do what? And it also almost implies that I might have done something, right? Me as the reader. So right here, where I say, listen, you've heard people say that sometimes you have to use a little correction with your dog when you're training, right? I'm over here, I'm already starting to imply that everyone else is wrong because I'm saying you've heard people. And that's just such a general statement. But, people in this case would be every single other dog person in the world besides me, right? And then I'm defining correction here by light spanking. And again, and my whole take on dog training is the use of positive reinforcement, which I do strongly believe in personally. I don't think you should really hit your animals. It's counterproductive, really. And then I go on to say, ignore these people. Because if you listen to them, the implied communication is if you listen to these people, it means that you hit your dog, or at least you condone hitting your dog. So I'm almost building this like subconscious communication with the reader that if you pay attention to any other trainer but me, then it means you obviously hit your dog, right? It's that A plus B equals C type of thing we talked about earlier. But it's very, very implicit and just simply implied instead of me coming right out and saying that, because it's much more effective if I said something like, if you listen to other trainers and then you must hit your dog, well, people are going to be like, hey, listen, you're an idiot, shut up. So I just kind of let that seep into their subconscious, so to speak. All right, so I'll come down to the next section where I'm doing a little us versus them here. And I'll move this up for you. Okay, this is an us versus them, but you'll notice I'm giving useful but incomplete information here. So in this email sequence, I'm talking about, I'll move up the page for you, I'm talking about how, they talk about corrections and how, if you spank your dog or use any kind of negative enforcement, you end up paying a high price. And then I give this scenario, right? And I'm giving a scenario which I'm really just kind of building and emphasizing the pain that people have. And this is the pain of having the dogs pull on your leash, which is a major issue for dog owners that really don't like it when the dogs pull the leash. It's like you're water skiing behind the dog, nobody likes that. So I start talking about what most people would tell you to do right here. Most dog owners would tell you to snatch the leash, scold your dog and say no, and maybe give your dog a firm swat on the backside and then keep on walking, which is really pretty much what most people would do because that's, a common approach to training. And I say this approach will not work ever. Right? And I'm saying, here's why this won't work. So I'm basically saying, here you have a problem. Here's a really good example of the problem. And here's why you're pretty much screwed, period. Especially if you do what they say, right? So I'm giving useful information, but it's incomplete. So that's exactly what you want to do because, you want to draw the correlation that if you want the complete information, they need to buy your stuff. And of course, the solution here is, fortunately this is easy to fix. All you have to do is train your dog using the walking exercises in my course and use the attention exercises in my course to hone your dog's responsiveness. And you can get the course here. And then I have a link, to where they can buy the stuff. So I really accentuate the problem here, draw a great picture of the problem, and then say you can fix the problem by buying my stuff. And this approach really works like a champ. It's not us versus them, but you can kind of see where I've pretty much created a situation where everyone else is wrong, and if you listen to anyone else, you have this big problem that I outlined up here, and the only way to fix it is to buy my stuff. I mean, I did it without coming right out and saying it. Now, this is where I'm going to start getting into overt us versus them, or explicit us versus them communication. And this is the one of my favorite, it's not your fault emails. If you remember, I said one of the great things about the us versus them approach is you can blame everything on them, right? And that way you absolve your audience from any sort of wrongdoing, and that absolution creates compliance. It's just a common human nature. If I come out and say, oh, listen, it's okay that you're a crackhead. It's no problem. It's those crack manufacturers' fault. The crackhead is going to be like, yeah, Frank, man, you're so great. Yeah, you understand me. And that's a universal to just about any problem. It's not your fault that your children are running around undisciplined. Of course you can't raise them right because Oprah Winfrey's shows are so good. It's Oprah's fault. I mean, if how could you not sit around and watch Oprah all day? She practically hypnotizes you into watching her. So you get my point there. So I come right out with the subject line, it's not your fault. And that's really hard to resist opening, especially if someone has been having this major problem hammered into them by previous communications. So if you'll notice, like that email I just showed you, I'm really honing in on the big problem, right, which is the dog pulling on the leash. And the big problem is, your dog pulls on the leash, he doesn't come, he jumps up on you or whatever. So I've been hammering this problem so much, so now when I come right out with the subject line, it's not your fault, it's something people definitely want to open and read, right? And even if you don't hammer that pain, they still want to open the subject. They still want to open the email because they want to know what's not their fault. Even if I just come up to you and I say, hey, listen, it's not your fault. If I were to walk up to you on the street, having not seen you or spoken with you at all, and said, man, listen, I know it's not your fault, you couldn't help but wonder what I was talking about. You'd probably say, what's not my fault? That would be the immediate reaction you had. What are you talking about? Because simply by saying it's not your fault means that there's something's going wrong somewhere, and that I know about it, right? So I introduce the us versus them here. A lot of Dachshund owners blame themselves when their dog misbehaves. They think maybe I did something wrong in the training, or Buddy's just acting out because I'm not spending enough time with him. But let me make something crystal clear to you right now, and bring this up here. It's not your fault, okay? And here's why. It's because 99.99%, I've actually scientifically measured this with a dog trainingometer, of all dog training or Dachshund training information is dead wrong. And see here? They steered you wrong. Everybody else steered you wrong. Of course it's not your fault. It's these, how could you expect to have a well-trained dog if you, go to PetSmart and let some 17-year-old high school kid train your dog? They don't know this stuff. This is crazy. Of course it's not your fault. And I go on to say, in fact, most of the tips you've gotten about dog training can actually make your dog worse. AKA, if you listen to them, things are only going to get worse, right? And then you can see some of the big problems, the big misconceptions here. And there's my links where I would have that there. And then, of course, I say you can fix this right now. And so I'm hammering on to the problem that the dog's bad, and here's my solution, my breakthrough training course, right? So move on down here a little bit. I go on to say how great my stuff is, and I accentuate my guarantee, and then I have a little explicit or a little implicit, us versus them, where I say, don't you wish everything came with this type of guarantee? And this translates into don't you wish, or wished, as I just noticed, I misspelled that. Don't you wish they would be this nice? I'm implying that the other dog trainers out there don't have this kind of guarantee, do they? Which, of course, they don't. And the subconscious question that's formed in the prospect's mind is, well, why aren't they this nice? Why don't they offer this type of guarantee? I don't really need to come out and say it in this correspondence. So that's a little bit more us versus them. And then I want to show you another little tactic here. This isn't us versus them, but since I've got them hooked now and I'm bonding with them because I'm showing them the solution and I'm absolving them from their guilt, I've got their attention and they're kind of on my side here. I'm going to go ahead and paint the pretty picture. Imagine the feeling of pride and relief you'll have when Buddy comes to you every time you call, even if your dog is surrounded by cats, toys, and other distractions. And so I'm painting this, I'm having them put themselves into that state of relief, and pride. And I'm having them imagine the dog coming to them. And they're linking that up with me, which is really nice. I go on to do it furthermore in this paragraph and picture how happy you'll be when there are no more accidents in the house. And by accidents, I'm referring, of course, to the dog going to the bathroom on the floor. So that's another little tactic you might like to use when you're writing to people, is just put them in that state, in that desired outcome state. Imagine the look on your boss's face when you walk into the office Monday morning and say, I quit because I'm now making more money than you. But you've been a good boss, If you ever need a job, maybe I'll take you on. Send me your resume sometime. You know, imagine the pride you'll feel when your children know that when you know that your children are taken care of for the rest of your life and the rest of theirs, no matter if you work another day again. Well, that's what financial security means to you. See, I'm just kind of putting people into that, painting the pretty picture, putting that desired end result right there in front of them. So now let's get to a little bit like explicit, out and out, us versus them. You know, there's no beating around the bush here. Subject line is name, why are they so angry? Again, this is very hard to resist. You know, who's angry? Are they angry at me? Why are they angry? Who are they? What the hell are you talking about? You know, so again, like if I were to come up to you, and let's just say it wasn't me, let's just say it was like your neighbor who you don't even hang out with or whatever, just happened to come up to you and you're walking down the road and you're like coming out of a restaurant and they're going in and they say, hey, why are they so angry? And then the guy turns to leave. What are you going to do? Are you just going to like sit there and go, I don't know? No, of course not. You're going to be like, well, who? Who's angry? What are they angry about? You know, you'd say, hey, what are you talking about? You'd probably, if the guy walked away, you would probably follow him back into the restaurant and be like, dude, what are you talking about? You know, it's hard to resist this type of copy. And of course, I tie it in here. Other dog trainers are furious with me. And what I'm doing right here is I'm assigning an unfavorable characteristic of anger to them. Okay, so other dog trainers, not only does their stuff not work, but they're angry. They're the types of people who get angry about petty stuff like this. But I'm not really coming right out and saying it. I'm just planting that seed in their mind. So if I were to say something like, you know, why is John Reese so hungover all the time? You know, which he's not. Incidentally, that's just a silly joke I'm using. But the implication is that John Reese drinks liquor constantly and he's always hungover. You know, I'm assigning that negative trait. I could go on with that and say, well, God, you know, it must be really hard being a leader in business when you feel that terrible from drinking all the time. You know, and that's an exaggerated version of that. But you can see I'm assigning that unfavorable characteristic to them. And then here's when I start getting explicit, you know. They're angry with me because I'm making them look bad with my outrageous guarantee. And I go on to say, I'll flat out give you all my stuff if your dog isn't magically transformed, and this makes other trainers hopping mad because they can't stand behind their training like I do. That is explicit us versus them. And again, what am I doing? I'm not only am I positioning us versus them, but I'm assigning them this unfavorable emotion. Who wants to hang out with somebody who's hopping mad? Nobody, you know. And if you remember when I said I like to combine these storylines, here's a classic example, reluctant hero kind of thing. I'm not some trainer to the stars, and I've never been on TV. You won't read about me in magazines. I'm just a regular guy in Georgia with a wife. And I go on to say, and 2 daughters. The youngest is 8 weeks old. I wrote this a long time ago. My youngest daughter is now 2. Probably should update that. But plain and simple, I know my training will work for your dog, and I totally guarantee it. Your dog becomes a wonder dog, you get all your money back, and you can keep my entire course for free. Maybe you'll have a friend who might like it. Okay? And then I come down here and I move into some more absolution. And I'm linking everything else back up with them as well. So I go on to say maybe you've tried obedience classes with your dog and you've had no luck. Maybe you've bought a zillion training courses for your dog and they've all been duds. I know what it's like. I went through the same thing, and all I can say is this: it's not your fault. And again, I'm absolving them, and I'm saying that everybody else is dead wrong. And I'm linking the classes and other stuff to them, right? So basically every other person ever in the world, period, besides me is them. But I'm not coming right out and saying that, am I? I'm just linking this up in their minds with the them. So now we'll move, and I'll give you some examples of the work that I've done for other people, and we'll bring up the good old Pipeline Profits Boys Brothers Band again. And Pipeline Profits was primarily a reluctant hero, but it had just a little hint of us versus them, and especially when anytime I'm selling with the guru to the guru world, you know, I always do a little us versus them to sell against those pesky gurus who are out to get us all, you know. So, and that's effective. I don't think that will ever stop being effective, whether it's me writing the copy or somebody else. It's just it's easy pickings, really. That's just such an easy proposition to make. But I'm using primarily Reluctant Hero and Pipeline Profits, and most of the us versus them stuff in the Pipeline Profits campaign was implicit. So let me scroll on down here and get to the us versus them part of this. In this email, I'm talking about how another video is coming up, And I say, it looks like we're all systems to go for launching on Thursday. We give out official website, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as I put this little sentence in here, as soon as we figure out how to make one of those fancy countdown timers, this is more that, this is like an A minus B equals C kind of rationality here, because gurus use timers, or times, as I wrote down here. Gurus are bad, and we're not gurus, so we must be good, right? So we're not gurus because we don't have a countdown timer, because we don't know how to make one. Therefore, we must be good guys, all right? So that's that A minus B equals C and that kind of thing. Now here is, I have this official arm twisting policy section of the email, and I say, as you probably noticed, we're not really interested in twisting your arm and using high-pressure sales tactics in order to get you to join us. And why? Because that's what they do. And I don't come right out and say that's what they do, but I don't have to. Right? Because this market is so completely used to high pressure, you better buy it. There's going to be 3 copies available, and there are 8,000 million people on this list. And, Mother Teresa herself had just appeared to me last night in a dream and asked if she could order one or whatever. So I don't really need to come right out and hammer that. So I just say it here. And the implication is because that's what they do. We're not them. Therefore, we're good. All right? And incidentally, if you really go back and look at this campaign, it was extremely high pressure the whole time, but I diffused that high pressure by saying, we're not twisting your arm here, we're just saying that you better buy this or your head will explode. That's very effective as well. Now, here's another little implicated us versus them, or implied us versus them thing. I'm saying the last time we offered this, it filled up immediately, and we didn't even have a sales letter. And then I said we only offered it to a list of under 3,000 people, and it was full in under 24 hours. 253 people joined, to be exact. Plus, we didn't even do a launch or whatever. It was actually one of the worst sales pitches ever. Now, aside from the implied us versus them stuff here, this is actually really, really potent, because in previous correspondence here, as you'll see when you review the documents, I talk about how big the list is. Like the email I showed you a second ago. Let's see if I can find it up here. Let's see, hold on just a sec. Well, I'm trying to find out where I gave reference to how many people are on the list. I haven't done that yet. Okay, I had done it in the campaign, but I don't have that particular email. But prior to them receiving this, I'd already stated that there were over like 20,000 something people on the list. So look at the implied pressure here that I do without really coming out and saying it. I say, we only offered it to a list of under 3,000 people, and it was full in under 24 hours. Now, this list already has been told that there are over 20,000 something people on the waiting list, or something like that. I don't remember the exact number from where we were in this part of the sequence, and therefore they think it's probably going to sell out. So without me having to say that and be redundant and be, kind of what everybody else does, I say, listen, last time it sold out, there were only 3,000 people on the list in under 24 hours. Now, when I say right here, plus we didn't do a launch in quotation marks or whatever, I'm actually implying that all this stuff is stupid and I don't really know anything about it. Like, if I don't do a launch or whatever, that's like, when you have that tonality there, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever those guys do. And I say it was actually one of the worst sales pitches ever. And in that whole thing, I'm basically saying we're bad at sales pitches. Gurus are good at sales pitches. Therefore, we are not gurus, and therefore we're good. All right, so it's that kind of that somewhat irrational belief structuring that's going on there in their minds, and I'm just taking advantage of that. Here we go about the implied, that the heavy dutiness of the list size. It's further down in this email. I'd actually already talked to them about how big the list was, and now I say there are 36,002 people waiting in line. And then I address this, right? And this is such a great tactic you can use. This isn't particularly us versus them, but you always want to address something that's going on in the prospect's mind. So I say, and yeah, I know, you're probably thinking this sounds like your typical pre-launch song and dance. But, well, there actually are 36,002 people on our waiting list, and as it sits, only 500 people can become clients. And truth be told, we do want you to be our client, assuming this is right for you. So I'm coming out and saying, yeah, I know we're selling you something, and I know it sounds like this kind of stuff, but, we do have lots of people. And as soon as you just acknowledge something like that, a particular negative, and you bring it out to light, and you just make it little in their minds, you overcome it. Right? So if I were to take the approach and say there's 36,002 people waiting in line, you better buy because, do the math, then it would be like what everybody else does. But if I just come right out and say, yeah, I know, you're probably thinking this sounds like your typical pre-launch song and dance, aka what they do, right? And I say, well, there actually are 36,002 people on our waiting list, and as it sits, only 500 people can become clients. And then I come right out here and I say, and truth be told, we do want you to be our client, assuming you think this is right for you. Well, this is something that they don't typically do, right? It's not hard selling. It's selling under the radar, and I'm obviously playing the scarcity game right here, but I'm just coming right out and saying, yeah, I know it sounds like I'm playing the scarcity game, but, well, there really is scarcity. So I know it sounds like I'm trying to talk you into going to bed with me, miss, but, I really am wanting you to go to bed with me. Just acknowledging that and getting it right out front for some strange reason works. And, hey, why mess with what's working, right? And then, of course, I begin to almost directly start selling against them, but it's a bit still implied. So then I say, okay, listen, it's pretty obvious this will sell out in a few hours. And rather than play the scarcity game, which we're clearly playing right now anyway, right? And rather than playing the scarcity game, let's just be straight with each other. And what happens here is when I use the phrase, let's just be straight with each other, and I reference the scarcity game, and I put that in quotations to kind of like belittle it a little bit, what's really going on here is, again, that crazy equation. Gurus play the scarcity game, therefore they are not being straight with you. We are not playing the scarcity game, therefore we are not gurus, and therefore we are good. Right? That whole message is conveyed right there in that one little sentence implicitly. So now let me take you through a little sample from the StomperNet launch. Some more us versus them and more implied rather than come right out and stated. I'll show you the turning point email. What happened in StomperNet is we decided to delay the launch, and I can't remember why. I think it was because the sales letter wasn't ready or something. It was a good reason, and it never hurts to delay it, but we actually really did need to delay it, and I need to come up with a good reason why, and the reason why was, well, we think everybody just is too emotional about this, and we want you to take your time and really know what you're getting, aka we want you to read more of our propaganda, right? But it worked like crazy, and what I want to focus on right now is really just like the kind of implied us versus them stuff. So we began by saying we're going to get kicked out of the Guru Club for sure over this. Notice I put the Guru Club in parentheses. Again, whenever you do that, like if you and I are having a conversation, I'm looking at you, and I say something like, yeah, Jim came over with his girlfriend, and I do like the quote unquote thing with my fingers, that little two-finger quotation marks. What is it? It kind of implies that this whole girlfriend thing is silly, or Jim might not even have a girlfriend, or there's something weird about it. So whenever you put quotes around things like that and you use it in this context, it belittles that whole little thing that's in quotations, which you do again on just a very subtle and implicit level. So therefore, we can't possibly be gurus if we're going to get kicked out of the Guru Club, right? And then I go on, so we decided not to launch our whatever the name is tomorrow. I don't know why I put whatever the name is there. I'm pretty sure that at the time I wrote this email, I knew we were going to call it StomperNet. I had the boys fill in what's in the brackets here, so no one actually received. We're going to launch our whatever the name is. They actually put the name in there. And the reason why is simple. Too many people are beating down the door for it. And as weird as that seems, all this demand might be a bad thing. Okay, and now, a little bit more implied us versus them. We're concerned that some of the people demanding early admittance to our program are acting out of sheer emotional impulse. In parentheses again, I told you we get kicked out of the Guru Club for this. Anyway, yes, you want your customers to get all emotional and impulsively buy stuff from you, but this is different. Right? And we are different because we don't want you to do that. We're looking out for your best interests. We are not like these pesky gurus here. We're not preying on your emotions. Frenk Kern is not making you bond with us right now by having you realize that we're just looking out for you and we don't really want your money. That's absolutely not happening. That's crazy. How could you possibly think that? So then we come right out here and we say, see, Brad and I aren't doing this for the money. Unlike them. And this is a bit of a reluctant hero too, really, right? Because if you remember the reluctant hero formula, the reluctant hero isn't really revealing all this stuff for his own personal gain. It's he's just doing it because people are kind of making him do it, and he's been demanding. And it's also the same up there with the us versus them. You're not really revealing all this stuff for your own personal gain. You're just like doing it for the us, right? So we're not doing this for the money, unlike them, is the implication here. I think our videos prove that we're not really hurting for cash. Prior to their receiving this email, they had seen videos of Brad and Andy's other non-guru businesses where they just make $1 gazillion a second or whatever. It's really very impressive. They're pretty sharp guys there, I must say. And then, of course, I say we want to foster a like-minded community of people who all work for a common good. And again, I think that comment might get us banned from the high-price seminars for life. And then I go on, I back off, because you realize, no, you can't really hammer this too much, or else people are going to think you're just being stupid. So I say, okay, first off, no, we're not these selfless saints, and that's not what I'm saying. Obviously, we'll profit if a lot of people join, but only if it's the right group of people. And then I start doing that thing where, if you don't comply, then you must be one of them type of thing, right? So I say, we only want people who are serious, are willing to actually follow directions, are willing to share their results with their fellow members, and are willing to implement new and proven ideas. And the fact is, not all of the people who want in fit the bill. Some folks are nothing more than guru groupies. And what kind of happens here? Well, I'm not one of these people. I'm not a guru groupie, so you're going to have to let me in, right? I'm not looking for the next big thing. I'm a real person. I'm serious. I'm willing to actually follow directions. Therefore, I need to be able to buy so I can prove this, right? But of course, I don't really come out and say that. I just let that implied message get across. And now I want to go over a PS for one of the StomperNet emails with you that just have the anti-guru implications here. And here we go. This is for StomperNet again. Let me move it for you. According to Launch Protocol, I should be putting some more scarcity stuff in my email messages to you. Now, you should know at this point, I have piled on so much scarcity. It's absolutely insane, right? I mean, people are ready to, get on a plane, fly to the StomperNet headquarters, and hold them hostage in order to be able to get let into the group. But, get that out of the way there. But I'm still saying, I don't want to sound like scarcity. I know it seems like I'm putting scarcity on you, but the fact is there's lots of scarcity. And I know I should be putting more scarcity in here in addition to the 47 million tons of scarcity I've already dumped on your head. But again, if I say, and I'd be happy to do that, but it would be redundant. And here's the implied message. That's what the gurus do. We're not doing it. So therefore, we're not gurus. Gurus are bad, and we're not gurus, and therefore we are good. Right? And then what do I go on to do immediately? Start piling on scarcity. Quite frankly, Brad and I are still hammering out exactly how many people we'll be working with. It'll definitely be a limited number, far smaller than the amount of people on the waiting list. But forget about that for a minute. Scarcity, 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 but I didn't really just put scarcity on you. Forget about that. Pressure, 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 but I'm not trying to put pressure on you. You better do this or else your head's going to explode, but I'm not trying to put pressure on you. Just first let me tell you about some of this pressure I'm going to put on you. Right? That's essentially what I'm doing here. For some reason, internet marketing launches have become like a spectator sport or something. Okay? And that's not what we're going for here. Sure, it'll probably sell out fast or whatever, but we're not here to set a launch record, unlike them. And of course, I see the irony in this statement, because that launch did set a launch record. But, again, we're just positioning against them. People, these guys, they just want to do this big launch and get all this glory in this launch record. But, we're just here to find to find new members for our exclusive network and begin mutually profitable long-term relationships. Well, now that's true. They want to find customers who get value from them and stay with them for life. So that's clearly a true statement. And then I go on to say, if you're interested in StomperNet, which obviously they are, because you wouldn't be reading this email if you weren't, please make sure you're reading about what you get with it and what it can do for you. Make sure you watch all of the case studies so you can see how our clients have benefited from working with us. In other words, use everything I'm giving you to make an informed decision about this. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or anything, like them. It's just that on whatever launch date was to be inserted here, some of the most gifted marketers on the planet are going to be urging their huge lists of subscribers to join. So again, what am I doing? Piling on that scarcity. But I'm not trying to insult your intelligence like they would, and I'm not trying to put on scarcity or anything. I'm just saying here's some an enormous amounts of scarcity and pressure. And then I go on to further stir the pot. When you consider how talented at persuasion these folks are, it's fairly obvious that a feeding frenzy will take place. So I'm almost, again, doing more us versus them here by saying, listen, these pesky gurus are so good at persuasion, they're going to cause this crazy feeding frenzy. Now, you're on my list. I want you to go ahead and get in before all this kind of stuff happens because they're going to mess everything up for us. And then I kind of back off there by saying, well, are we complaining? Heck no, of course we're honored that so many top-notch people are endorsing us, and we're thrilled with the idea of getting new customers and creating new success stories. But you are on a special list, a.k.a. you are with us, a.k.a. you have been let in on the inside, a.k.a. you are not part of that melee that's going to ensue. All right? You've opted into my list. and I want to make sure you decide to work with me because you believe it's best for you. Now, what did I just say? You're on a special list. You believe it's best for you. Like if you just look at the all caps there, so a little dual communication going on there. Not because someone talked you into it, right? And not because Frenk Kern has written these emails on my behalf and talked you into it. No. We want you to come up with your own decision, right? And this is why I'm going into such painstaking detail about what's included with StomperNet, so you can decide now. That way you can go straight to our site on the launch day and become a member if that's what you choose to do. Okay? And again, I say I talk about the frenzy that's going to happen. There's no need for you to be a part of that group. There's no need for you to be a part of those commoners, those silly, crazy people. You're with us. You can just go ahead and join. You can just go ahead and join. You don't want to be with those dummies. You want to come here and just go ahead and join. Is what you do. And this was, and just like as an aside here, this email for StomperNet was extremely easy for me to write. That whole campaign was very easy for me to write once I got what they were offering, because I really believed then, and I still believe now, that they had an excellent service to offer. I mean, Brad Fallon and Andy Jenkins know what they're doing, especially with SEO. They've got this team, like they probably have the best SEO team in the world that also helps them teach StomperNet, and their members are rabidly loyal. So, my assumption there was right, that they were delivering value. So when I kind of jokingly talk about, I'm really applying all this scarcity and all this pressure here, even though I'm like saying I'm not trying to put pressure on you, but here's some more pressure, I really didn't have any trouble doing that, because I was writing absolutely congruently believing that I had the reader's best interest at heart, and that by taking advantage of StomperNet, that people would benefit, which I believe they did. So that's kind of a little bit of a sermon there, but it's extremely hard to do this if you're not selling something good. It's really easy to do this if you're selling something that A, is really good, that will benefit people, and B, is what people want in the first place. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed those us versus them examples, and I hope you got a little bit out of seeing how I kind of weave in a little hypnotic mass control type stuff in here in these messages. And in our next video, we'll talk about the hometown boy makes good. So I'll see you there.